Welcome into another edition of Tampa 2. Casey Phillips here with staff writer Bree Dix. And man, we got a win to talk about. We have maybe the most important game of the whole year coming up. Oh, yes. This is a good Tampa 2. We're just sitting right in this little sweet spot of a win and a very exciting game to look forward to. So let's just start with this win over the Panthers. Tell me what stands out to you.
Yeah. Well, I think really you saw, other than kind of a little bit of the slow start for the offense, there was so many positives, whether it was Mike Evans just having an absolute historical day, shattering records, or Antoine Winfield Jr. with kind of that game-sealing interception, or even the continuous strides in the run game. They had, the best rushing output they've had so far this season. But then offensively, just Mike Evans, man, 10th straight 1,000-yard season.
Yep.
That is just baffling. I mean, up there, only Jerry Rice has more. But just his, not only the consistency, but the longevity, doing it with multiple offensive coordinators, multiple systems, and just the ability that he's been able to have. And I think just even that 75-yard running catch for the touchdown that kind of ignited the offense in that game after the slow start with just one touchdown in the first half was just vintage Mike Evans, kind of baited the DB a little bit on the corner route, then got inside on the stem for inside leverage, and then just absolutely hit it with his long strides. Had like a Superman-esque move to get over the pylon. Just absolutely incredible play by him. And then even just the 12-yard reverse by Chris Godwin for the touchdown later on in the game. Just all around, I think it was good to see the strides. And even like Kate Otten had the blocking to kind of get Chris Godwin into the end zone. And then just to see, again, the strides that the run game has made showed that it kind of wasn't an anomaly against the Colts. They were able to have that effectiveness again, whether it was between the tackles, whether it was getting Rashad White in space. He had over 100 yards from scrimmage. And then defensively, Antoine Winfield Jr., man, just the interception, which again just kind of shows his prowess. Adam Thielen kind of initially gained separation out of this stem, and then Bryce Young kind of had to roll out of the pocket. Kalijah Cansey just came in like a stinking missile. And he kind of hit Adam Thielen late, and then Antoine Winfield just took advantage of the entire situation, undercut the ball, intercepted. But, I mean, even just the way that J.J. Russell, safety Ryan Neal, playing kind of the second linebacker in the nickel dime packages, filling in for K.J. Britt when he got injured. At that point, it was like, heck, are we going to need to suit up for this? Yeah. I mean, just injury after injury after injury. But to see the way that those guys kind of all stepped up, rallied around, and held the Panthers to 3 of 15 on third down. 3 of 15, that's crazy. So just kind of the strides they were able to make in that regard was, I think, really encouraging to see.
I concur on all of that. I felt like I want to share a couple things about Mike Evans, stats-wise, outside of that one. I just felt like we needed to sit in the Mike Evans celebration moment as long as possible. So, again, the whole 10th straight 1,000-yard season, I feel like because it's happening every year, it can be easy to not even understand how incredible that is. Right. So, of course, he's extending his own record already. Yeah. Love when people do that. Like, I'm going to set this record, then I'm going to just keep going after that. So, extended his own record in terms of to start a career. And then in terms of the whole 1,000-yard seasons and everything, now has tied Randy Moss for second most behind only Jerry Rice. Those names, if you are in the conversation with those names, it's unbelievable.
Yes.
And, this week on our Bucs Insider Show with Scott, we talked a little bit about Mike, and it was like every stat we would pull up on a graphic, and it would show the people around him in any category, essentially, whether it was like the yards and the 1,000-yard seasons and the touchdowns and everything we talked about. Scott would put an asterisk next to every other person's name that was in the Hall of Fame, and it was everyone.
Yes.
That every single person anywhere near Mike in these categories, above him, below him, whatever it is, they're all in the Hall of Fame. And so I just love seeing that these stats, it's like he is going to be in, and I imagine it, to me, it has to be a first ballot thing because you're looking at these names he's next to, and it's incredible. So tied for the 13th most touchdown receptions in NFL history. He's second in the league this season in touchdowns. And I also just love this season, and as we bring up his 75-yard touchdown, the fact that that's the longest reception of his career.
I was shocked by that too.
I think that also speaks to just what we think of Mike Evans, that we're like 75, that's it. Which is
he never had
funny.
a 90.
Yeah, it's like we just assume that he's had, 99-yard receptions all the time. And then, so now he has 5 catches this season of over 40 yards, which is the 3rd most in the NFL. I'm really excited to see the way that the combination of 2 things for that stat. One, the deep ball connection that he and Baker have.
Yes.
I think that is so huge for this offense, but also his yak ability. I think that was something that I remember Mike talking about earlier on in his career here. That was the big area that he wanted to improve on. And it was like Mike was ending up in these very contested catch situations, which are one of the harder ones to get a lot of yak yardage. And he was always getting double teamed. There was so much attention on him that it was a little bit harder. And to see the combination of both his ability to get yak and to get that deep ball connection with Baker, huge stuff. So,
well, I think he said after the run, he like threw up on the sideline.
Yeah, he's like, just had to go throw up a little bit.
I don't blame you.
And I love that he said that. Yeah, that he was like, I was so mad when they weren't calling it a touchdown. Like, if I'm going to run that far, I would really appreciate.
And I'm going to run that fast.
Yeah. And then also, last little Mike Evans stat here. He became, this week, the first player in NFL history with at least 60 receptions in each of his first 10 seasons.
A lot of firsts.
So, I mean, again, when you're the first in the NFL to do anything at this point, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then, you brought up Rashad and just the fact that consistent yards from scrimmage. And then what stands out to me now is last game and this game to have a over 30-yard run. Because the same way we're talking about the deep ball to Mike, you want to have those explosive runs every now and then. That's what we were missing earlier this season, is they were having to just slog it out in the run game for these shorter gains. To now see he's getting some of those explosive runs. Really exciting. And then also I just loved this stat. Just wanted to shout out Chris Godwin for his touchdown. He passed Jimmy Giles for the 4th most touchdowns from scrimmage in franchise history. Big guy to pass. A lot of touchdowns. So, and then on the defensive side of things, you brought up the 3rd down thing. That was one of the big things that stood out to me. Holding them to 3 of 15 on 3rd downs. That is the 2nd lowest 3rd down conversion rate that we've allowed in a game this season. And dating back to the 2006 season, our 3rd down conversions allowed that game were tied for the fewest in which their opponent had 15 or more chances, going all the way back to the 2006 season. To do that with like your 18th string inside linebacker, like, I mean, that's an pretty impressive, incredible thing. And of course, I just really want to shout out Brian Neal for stepping in at a entirely different position.
Who had, what did they say, like 1 walkthrough?
It was
practice?
Like 6 snaps in 1 walkthrough. And
it's fine.
They also held them to 4th fewest yards they've allowed all season. And they are 4-0 when allowing less than 300 yards. So that has been the recipe for success. You hold them under 300 yards, you'll win. But I mean, just Ryan Neal getting, especially that 3rd and 1 stop at the goal line, that was such a crucial play. And he and Christian Izien were both in on that one. And I just thought about the way that game ended, being a 3-point game, the difference in 7 versus 3 there, that was the game. Like, you can almost point to that one play as potentially a difference maker there. And then Antoine, as we talked about, I want to read his stat line.
Oh, yes.
It's an absurd stat line. So 8 tackles, 2 for loss, 3 passes defensed, 1 sack, an interception. With that stat line, he became just the 3rd player since these stats kind of all became recorded to have this stat line in a single game. That's insane. This is what I think is so cool about Antoine. There are a lot of good safeties out there who do a lot of things well. I don't know how many there are that do that many things that well. The way he so consistently has a stat in all of these categories.
The passes defense, the sacks, the tackles for loss.
And the forced fumbles and all these. I mean, it's just incredible. And Scott and I were talking about the idea of how often in the game he was the guy making the play that got you off the field. And that as a defensive player, that's it. Your job is to get off the field, and he was the guy whether it was an interception or forced fumble or making the tackle or getting the sack, whatever it was, he was the guy helping us get off the field.
I feel like this next game, I keep telling myself I'm going to do it, and then I always forget. But I feel like I want to just have a little tally going in the corner where every time they say Antoine's name.
Yeah.
I want to just put a little, because I mean, it seems like every other play, they're like, Antoine Winfield Jr. with the tackle for loss, Antoine Winfield Jr. with the tackle.
Yeah, it's so true.
I mean, it's never ending. Yes.
It's true. And then he also got a sack, his third of the season, 12th of his career. So it's also his 18th quarterback hit since 2020, which is tied for the most in the NFL by a defensive back. And his 12th sack since 2020, which is the most by a defensive back in that time.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. Why would it not be? All right, so let's take a look at this injury report as we talked about how big of a factor that was in this game. So are you and I going to have to suit up for inside linebacker again, or do we feel like they might have a few more people at their disposal?
There is hope that Levante David will be back on Sunday. He has practiced as a full participant this week, done more of walkthroughs, but still kind of an estimation he's been a full participant. Devin White has still not participated in practice, and I don't love the fact that Vita Vea has been on the injury report this week with a toe injury. He has not participated in practice. Jamel Dean with the ankle foot injury, he's still been out. And then Chris Godwin has been dinged up with a neck injury, and he has also been a non-participant. Those are certainly some to look out for, and we may end up seeing more of Greg Gaines on Sunday alongside Elijah Cansey. So,
yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch for sure. And so now, especially looking at this Falcons team, who we know fans of running the ball.
They are.
Big fans. Tell me your one-on-one matchup that stands out to you.
So I tried to go away with my generic, everyone pretty much against Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier and Cordell Patterson. So I went with Carlton Davis against Drake London, just because I think that's going to end up being an absolutely crucial matchup. You know, Drake London is kind of Desmond Ritter's go-to target, has the hip fluidity, and he's just kind of been the guy that he looks at. And then Carlton Davis, Drake London's kind of that bigger-bodied receiver, and Carlton Davis is a guy that kind of matches that physicality. He effectively jams, can blanket guys on the boundary. So I feel like that's going to end up being a crucial matchup in this. And then I also went with Baker Mayfield against Jesse Bates. And Jesse Bates kind of in the same conversation that kind of we talk about Antoine Winfield. He's a guy that's just really taken off since he's been with the Falcons. That, again, just kind of does a lot of things well, whether it's making plays from zone coverage on the ball, whether it's kind of pattern matching receivers. But his ball tracking ability and reading the quarterback's eyes is rare. So Baker Mayfield is certainly going to have to know where he's at all times. And, I mean, these are things that Baker Mayfield has kind of stressed all week. So I think those, for me, are going to be keys. And then, of course, everyone against their run game.
Right.
Against Bijan Robinson.
I did go the just sort of obvious one of, I was like, well, you know, I mean, but I guess it's becoming less obvious in terms of who I'm going to list as this one-on-one part of the matchup against Bijan in their run game, because of course I would traditionally say Vita Vea, which, I mean, he may well still play, but again, of course, it's always if he does, what percent is he at, how healthy is he? Right. So then it's, you know, Vita Vea if he's healthy. If not, I think that Elijah Cansey is just going to have to step up in a big way in the run game that we've talked about, how I think he has exceeded a lot of expectations in the run game, of where there was just this assumption, I think, that he would not be as strong in that area because of his size. Mm-hmm. That they were drafting him to think of him as a particularly pass rush specialist defensive lineman. Right. And he has proven his worth in both areas, which I think is so exciting for Bucs fans. Right. So if you are either without Vita or a banged up Vita, is, you know, Kalijah stepping up in that way? And then, or to your point, is it Greg Gaines? Because I think we saw, you know, Mike Green has been injured. And so just in general. And then, of course, I mean, we can always ask Will Golston, as Coach always refers to him, Steady Eddie, you always know what you're going to get from Will Golston. But, yeah, it may have to be a little bit more of a committee approach than just the Vita Vea show, like we sometimes think of it. And then, on the other side of the ball, I think... Well, and then also, I guess I could say inside linebacker as well against the run game, because, again, not knowing exactly who all's available, how healthy is everybody, same thing, of where not knowing that no matter who's in their defensive line, they're not necessarily stopping everything at the defensive line level. And are your inside linebackers healthy enough and in a position to make some of those plays when they need to? And then on the offensive side of things, the one-on-one, I went with Baker versus Jesse Bates. I mean...
Love this for us.
I had to do it. And I mean, he leads them in tackles, forced fumbles, interceptions.
Yes.
And when I had Antoine Winfield on the radio show a few weeks back, I asked him, like, who are the guys around the league that you really enjoy watching and try to learn from? And he said Jesse Bates. Yep, right. That it was, without hesitation, the name that he gave. So this is a guy playing at an incredibly high level.
Yeah.
I love that essentially it's like we got two safeties showcasing their skills, that they're like putting up like MVP
secondary love,
MVP kind of numbers for their team.
Right.
So that was the other one. How about position group for you?
So I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what you just said with Kalijah Cansey, but for the position, I did the interior of the Bucs defensive line, and then I did tight ends. But for the interior of the defensive line, Vita Veas is kind of that guy that has been a huge part of the run defense that the Bucs have created, and kind of that juggernaut, that imposing force that's kind of been in the top of the hierarchy in the conversation. Just his ability to eat up blockers, kind of helping out Kalijah also in the passing game, just his ability to take on guys, freeing up Kalijah, but also just in the run game. I mean, he just kind of sets the tone. So if you potentially don't have him in that lineup, kind of how are they able to step up and to stop the run? Because Bijan Robinson is just such a freak athlete. He's a guy that plays with the low center of gravity. He has the power to run between the tackles, but he is also so elusive in the open field. And if he gets to the second level, I mean, he can score on a dime and make people miss. So how are they able to kind of clog him up at the line of scrimmage? But also you have a guy like Tyler Algier that is just a straight bulldozer. I mean, constantly keeps his legs churny. So even if you don't have Robinson, you have to deal with Algier. So how they're able to kind of work against that. And then tight ends, I think it could be a big day for them. So the last game I think it was in week 10, the game that they gave up 131 yards to the Cardinals tight end Trey McBride. Wow. That is not great. Those are like receiver numbers that they gave up. So I think this could potentially end up being a game for K. Doughton, for Payne Durham, who's kind of come into his own, or O'Keefe even, just to see whether it's exploiting the middle of the field on, I mean, they play so many roles, whether it's the chips, the blocking downhill like K. Doughton did for the touchdown, or you've seen many times with O'Keefe doing, but just how they're able to kind of create those matchups. And I feel like really they kind of elevate the multiple personnel groupings that we use here with kind of their ability to do different things and being those combination tight ends, especially K. Doughton. So this could be a game that he kind of is able to exploit the underneath area of the field. And you might see him in kind of some of those one-on-one chip matchups. So I'm excited to see how that plays out for the tight end group this week.
That's really interesting. I like that one.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that for my position groups, I went with our inside linebackers and our offensive line. So our inside line, I mean, again, just the Falcons have the 5th most rushing yards in the league. And I do think it's interesting that typically when you're playing a division opponent for the second time, you have so much more understanding, right, of who they are, what works against them, what doesn't. But it is so interesting that Bijan basically didn't play the first time we played them, that he was under the weather and
they still had a great rushing total. Yeah.
Right. And so, they showed they can rush. I mean, they have such an incredible running back room. Any of them can break out at any point.
Right.
But the fact that we didn't get the chance to really go against him and learn what that looks like, this is really our first time having to face him.
Right.
And that's always tough when you don't. That's supposed to be kind of the advantage you have the second time you go against a team. And of course they have it against you too, where they've seen how you've played against them. But just to not really have gotten that chance to go against him very much, it's going to be interesting to see what he brings that wasn't there that first game when they did, as you pointed out, still had a really great rushing game. And then so our offensive line. So the Falcons defense has the 8th lowest completion percentage allowed and the 7th lowest yards per carry allowed. That their defense has really been pretty incredible this year. They put a lot of resources into it in the offseason, brought in a lot of new people. And I just thought in terms of their defense really not giving up a lot in either the pass or the run game, I want to see this offensive line step up and have a big game where they give Baker time, give Rashad some of those holes. Like it's got to start there because this Falcons defense is not one that seems like you can exploit it a whole lot, that they're not going to necessarily beat themselves. And so you're going to have to impose your will a little bit more. And I just feel like I've seen a lot of great things from our offensive line as this season has gone on. I talked to Robert Hainsey this week and just talked about the way the run game in particular has improved and asking him about it. And he was like, yeah, I mean, it was a new system and a bunch of new offensive linemen in different spots. And we all knew it was going to take some time to really get it all worked out, to be super comfortable. And he was saying how the offensive line chemistry is great at this point, and they all feel like they really understand things a lot better. And it just feels like, when I think back to this first matchup against the Falcons as to now, this run game in particular and the offensive line feels very different to me, and in a really good way.
Right.
And I think we've seen that the last time we played them, it was Matt Filer in there in the starting lineup, and Aaron Stinney is now in there. And I mean, Matt was doing a great job, but man, Stinney has just really been holding it down, and the guys have a lot of praise for him. So I just think that the offensive line is a different group in so many ways in terms of their comfortability in the offense, their communication level, familiarity with each other, that's going to be a big difference from this first Falcons matchup to this time.
Right. Well, and even Dave Canales this week talking, he was asked who he would name as the most improved player, and he said Cody Malk.
Yep.
And just kind of his ability, the hand placement, he's playing faster now. But also just for Rachaad White, being able to kind of see, letting those combo blocks develop and then hitting the hole and kind of bursting through. And I think you're starting to see, like you mentioned, just kind of that synergy and the continuity that they're having at this point in the season.
Yeah, also, I'm glad you brought up that about Rachaad and hitting the hole and stuff. So I had Harold Goodwin on my show this week, who's the run game coordinator, and was just talking about Rachaad and what he's seen as his improvement. And he was talking about what the running back coach, Skip Pete, has been working on with him is his pad level of running with just his pads lower. Because he's like, look, if you get hit at the same spot, but your pads are lower, that's another yard or two you're getting falling forward. And so he said he really feels like he's seen that Rashaad's pad level has been lower.
Right.
And he's done a really good job of that, of just that little tweak of always staying lower. And that's where you're seeing that extra little bit as he's falling forward. All right, so keys to the game for you.
For offensively, I'm going to go with red zone. So the Falcons right now are ranked as the number one red zone defense in the NFL. And the Bucs offense, kind of in contrast, has struggled with that a little bit. And I think the last time these two teams met in Week 7, the Falcons won on that walk-off field goal by Younghoe. So, okay, how the difference between 3 points as opposed to 7 down there, the Bucs have to be able to cash in. Because, I mean, we've seen it over and over. They'll have these methodical, sustained drives, and then you have a penalty or just all of these things kind of piecing together that just end up halting it at those critical, crucial times. So for the Bucs, are they able to get in and get 7 instead of 3? I think is going to end up being the deciding factor in the game. And then defensively, being able to limit the Falcons' 6th ranked rushing attack and be able to set the tone at the line of scrimmage, and then kind of force them to be one-dimensional. And so then it isn't Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier and Drake London, and then you're kind of able to hone in on Drake London and Kyle Pitts and kind of their ability with, I mean, just Drake London, you see the basketball background, the high point ability, and then Kyle Pitts is just unicorn, the size, the athleticism, his ball skills. So I think being able to do that, and that just is a little bit demoralizing for a team when you're just constantly bottling things up at the line of scrimmage. But, I mean, even a guy like Tyler Algier, I mean, I think he's one of the best in the NFL at running against 8-man boxes, running against those stacked boxes.
Yep.
So, and then it's, okay, well, if you load up the box to kind of stop Algier or Patterson or Robinson, well, then you run the risk of Drake London or Kyle Pitts being able to beat you down the seam or down the field. So kind of being able to get a hand on the run game, especially if you don't have Vita Vea in there, I think is going to be a big confidence boost for the Bucs defense.
I like that. Yeah, I think for me, it's the starting quicker.
Okay.
Because anytime a team has this kind of a run game, they want that lead so they can run the ball. We've talked about, man, this team, for whatever reason, there's just this little bugaboo about that opening drive not getting the touchdown. This is the game to do it. This is the game where you want to get a lead that keeps them from feeling like they can just run that clock, run the ball, that if they get ahead, they're going to feel like they're in control.
Yeah.
And so I think a faster start is big. And then I think the turnover ratio. I remember that was the big reason that the game was able to be down there at the last time. I mean, if you think about they forced 3 goal line fumbles against Desmond Ridder the first time we played them. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's a sign that, man, you got to, like I said, their defense, pretty sound. So you got to protect the ball. You know, Jesse Bates is back there trying to pick it off. Protecting the ball and then forcing some turnovers is going to be really important to, again, keeping the momentum, keeping the lead. Right. So those would be my keys, I think. And of course, I mean, obviously, stop the run, obviously key to every game, but particularly this one. Yeah. I felt like we both just didn't even feel like we needed to say it as much. So, all right, quote of the week. What do you got?
I am going to go with a quote from, speaking of the run game, from the defensive line coach and run game coordinator, Casey Rogers, on Mr. Robinson. And he said, well, it's just another explosive player they're putting on the field. They do a great job in the running game, but he adds another additional element to it because of his speed and explosiveness. If you misfit a run here, he goes 75 yards, not 25. It'll be critical that we are on point from that. And I just thought that quote was so telling and just kind of epitomizes what the goal of this game is going to have to be, getting those effective pursuit angles. Because, I mean, if you're arm tackling the guy or you don't have the right leverage, I mean, he's going to immediately burst for 60 to 70 yards.
Yep. I like that. So it was funny you brought up the Cody Mauch thing because that was one of my quotes that I picked. Yes. As Dave Canales was asked about the most improved player from week 1, and he said Cody Mauch, he said just being thrown into the fire and battling his way like we've talked about before, working through the issues. I think there's a depth to his person where he doesn't get shaken. A lot of times you get a rookie and all of a sudden they start losing confidence. You start thinking about, should we play a veteran at this spot? I just saw him stay steady. He's got that hard work ethic, and he's just a really even-keeled guy, and he's really smart. So to see him process those things but not over-process it to the point where it was crippling to his performance, I can't be more proud of the progress he's made. I loved that because there's improvement in X's and O's, right? There's improvement in, like you talked about, he did mention, like, the hand placement or this and that, like these sort of tangible things. But I loved what he said about how often rookies can just lose confidence right away. That if things aren't going well, right away, they can start to question themselves, doubt, and you can't play back on your heels in the NFL. You've got to be aggressive. You've got to be playing with confidence. And I love that he was saying, look, he is just an even-keeled guy. And look, he has had to face some of the best in the league this year. When you've looked at the opponents the Bucs have had and what their defensive fronts are like, as you look at the 49ers, as you look at the Eagles, you look at some of these teams, he's right. He got thrown into the fire from a smaller school to the NFL against some of the best.
Reminds me of like Luke Gedeke last year with all the incredible 3 takes he had to go up against.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot to be said for that, and he's just stuck with it and improved. And I think that's a really great sign for him for moving forward. I also liked the quote where Coach Canales was asked about where he feels like he's improved as a coordinator in his first year. He said, for me, it's like every week is a lesson. We played the Falcons the first time. We got a little bit over a minute left, and I throw the ball 3 times and give them a chance to go back down and get a field goal. We've made gains in that regard in terms of clock management. Can I sneak in a run or a screen right here and still be able to function without being in a hurry up? That's kind of one of the ways, just balancing some of those known pass situations, whether it's a draw or a screen, and then also just being able to be disciplined for myself on when we do have a big play designed for a specific coverage, not to get so excited that I'll prematurely call it in a place it doesn't quite fit. Really being patient for those 70% or better type of situations to attack the coverage. First of all, I just loved the willingness to share that. I mean, look, how many of us enjoy talking about maybe what we don't feel like we did as well as we could have? Like, I loved that. I loved that he was willing to say, like, hey, you know what? I did these things, and now I realize that wasn't exactly what I should have done, and now here's where I'm improving. Here's what I'm working on with it. It was just really great insight to see that, and I loved the idea of just being, like, too excited about a play and calling it a little sooner than you did. Yeah, I thought that was, I'm like, that would be me as an offensive coordinator. I'd just always be like, Mike.
I love this one.
Yeah, deep to Mike, go. Deep to Mike, go. So that was great. All right, and then we always close with a bit of a human interest thing, an off the field thing, and it was very easy this week because Antoine Winfield Jr. has been nominated for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. And first of all, my favorite award of all time. Because it's about being good at football and also what you do in the community. So it's just one of the most prestigious amazing awards you can be given, and Antoine absolutely deserves it. So he's been working with 2 local nonprofits, the Heart Gallery of Tampa and a Kids Place of Tampa Bay. So basically, he's sort of made it his mission that kids in the foster care system are able to have some of the same experiences as other children are. So he has taken 55 children housed at the facility trick-or-treating throughout a neighborhood, and along with his fiance, they've taken groups to buy makeup for some of the girls, arranged a spa day, they've gone to a local trampoline park, he's taken some of them to Topgolf, like just doing all these really wonderful things, and he goes with the kids and has a blast and just hangs out with them. And what I loved is, I remember talking to him, I don't think he has any personal experience with foster care. So traditionally, typically, and there's nothing wrong with this, everybody tends to choose causes they have been personally affected by. That's just natural, and I don't think there's anything better or worse about that. But I just thought it was so cool that for him, like, he just kind of learned about this and thought this is important and has given to it, even though Antoine wasn't in the foster care system, there's no personal thing to it, but he just thought, man, this is something that needs attention, that's important, and I love that. And he really is just one of the best role models in terms of how to be a professional football player on the field, off the field. He's so nice to everybody in the building. Always smiling, always respectful, always on time, and practices the right way all the time. I mean, it's just, there's never been 1 second that I don't think Antoine Winfield is doing what he, like, not only just should do, but more than he should do. So just wanted to shout out Antoine Winfield Jr., amazing on the field, and also very deserving of this award off the field. So, all right, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Tampa 2. We will see you next time.